outside the gates of Government House, and I hope someone brings a glass of champagne over to you.
Thanks very much, Scott.
Andrew O'Connor on the line there from outside Government House, Perth. And joining me in the studio is Professor David Flint, a renowned monarchist, law lecturer and author, including having written a book about Her Majesty. It sounds as though the representative there, 1,500 in itself, is a large gathering, but it sounds like generally there is, as there has been right around the country, a great deal of interest in Her Majesty's visit.
Yes, we certainly saw that in Melbourne and in Brisbane. Melbourne was magnificent. The number of people who were out there, I gather, was enormous, and what was also interesting was the spontaneous singing of God Save the Queen. I remember back when they had the Commonwealth Games, there was a dispute as to whether that should be played. You might remember the organisers didn't want to play it, but the crowd started to sing it spontaneously anyway when they sung a few bars or presented a few bars.
Now, one of the websites that your organisation, or the organisation you're a member of, the Australians for a Constitutional Monarchy, you have a side website called Crown Republic, and on it you write, or somebody writes, "The Queen is now revered as she was when she first came to Australia." That's a big call, isn't it? The crowds were enormous in 1954.
Certainly the crowds were enormous, but of course we didn't have... And I remember it personally. I'm old enough to remember that. In fact, I was out there. I remember going with some other boys. We saw a Marilyn Monroe film and slept overnight in Macquarie Street and actually saw her.
From Marilyn to Her Majesty.
Yes, that's right.
That's quite an outing.
Yes, and it was wonderful, but those were the days before television. So if you wanted to see someone, you actually had to go and see them. You couldn't, for example, watch the cricket or watch a football game on your television set. You had to actually go and see it. So it was a different world which required your presence, whereas today many people see things at home with the comfort of home. So it reduces the number of people who come up, but it still was a very large number of people in Melbourne and Brisbane, and as I understand it, this function in Perth on the banks of the Swan River, this barbecue, will be very well attended, and rightly so.
So you, in that comment, you're talking not so much about the sheer numbers, but the level of affection, of admiration for Her Majesty. You feel that that hasn't dissipated or waned over the 57 years since that first visit?
No, in fact it's gone up. There was a time, at the time of the matrimonial problems in the royal family, the death of Diana, when the Queen did not have such a high approval rate. But I felt then, I remember writing then, that as she grew older she would be revered more, and the example was Queen Victoria, who in her last few years everybody revered her, whereas there was a time when she was unpopular because she was so upset over the loss of her husband she almost withdrew from public life. The Queen has never done that, of course.
Now, talking of Queen Victoria, if Her Majesty continues to reign for, is it another 4 years? Yes. She will have been the longest reigning British monarch, is that correct?
That's right, yes. She's already among the leaders, and she will be. And it's interesting that they're talking about changing the laws of succession and doing away with male primogeniture so that males have a privilege over women. The interesting thing, of course, is if you look back over the years, I think the best performing monarchs, Elizabeth I, Victoria and the Queen, have been the most formidable monarchs, have been women. So perhaps it's not a bad idea to give women at least the same equality that men have.
Having talked about the popularity of Her Majesty, as we watch these live pictures here coming in from Government House, Perth, where a reception is being held, a state reception for Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh. As we watch these pictures, there has been some talk by some about, well, why not now have the Republican debate again? In fact, I read where after his book launched the other day, Thomas Keneally reportedly lamented the lack of political interest in this debate at the moment, and said the Queen's visit presents an opportunity for discussing the whole notion of constitutional change. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I think it's the most inappropriate time to discuss it, but it's a free country and people are open to doing that. But I must say that the Republican movement has taken a step backwards to what it was in 1999, because in 1999 they had a clear idea of the sort of republic they wanted, and they presented a model to the people which the people rejected in every state and 72% of electorates. I think after 11 years or 12 years in going on about a republic and campaigning for a republic, they really have to explain what sort of republic they want, how it will fit in, and why it will be better in terms of governance for the Australian nation. I don't think there's a need for this. I see other areas of government where we may be looking at changing the Constitution. There's a personal view, but certainly I don't think the Crown is the problem in our constitutional system.
What do you think it is? It's often the outsider's view that brings a fresh perspective. And Nick Bryant, who's just finished his posting as the Australia correspondent from the BBC, he's not entirely an outsider. He's an Australian now, or a permanent resident. He said in his book, it's one of the most conspicuous of Australian paradoxes that we still countenance this institution, this ancient institution, that in so many ways stands in defiance of what so many Australians hold dear as what they see as self-recognition. So what is it that keeps this most conspicuous of paradoxes, to use Nick's words, going?
I don't think a feeling that the Crown is inappropriate is a widespread feeling. I think it is dominant in what I would call the inner city elites among intellectuals, public intellectuals. You'll find it stronger there, and I think polling shows that. But I don't think it is widespread amongst the community at large. I don't think they have a strong view on this, but this is an institution which has been with us from 1788. It's an institution which doesn't cause them any problems. It doesn't impose taxes. There are no new laws which come as a result of the Queen. She's not paid. There's going to be no golden handshakes. There's no superannuation. So here's an institution, and we do have a Westminster system, which means that the executive and the lower house are going to be intimately involved with one another. And what we argued in 1999 was you need another institution. As Churchill said, the Crown is important not so much for the power it has, but the power it denies others. And that was our argument in 1999. We didn't go on the qualities, eminent as great as they are, of the Queen. We said it's the constitutional system which is important, and you have to keep that.
Let's talk about those eminent qualities of the person herself. Once again, Nick Bryant says he thinks a lot of Australians don't really care either way for this debate, and they're not monarchists, but they are Elizabethans. In other words, they may not embrace or even support the institution, but they like this lady.
I think this idea of people being monarchists and republicans is it's not a strong thing. When we held one demonstration, that was about New South Wales Government House. We got out 20,000 people in Sydney over Government House in 1996. The Republicans have held two demonstrations, one at Parramatta Park before the referendum. They got about 70 people, including the celebrities, to that. They held in the Mate for a Head of State campaign, which they did a few years ago. It culminated with the sausage sizzle on Bondi, including Republican celebrities. They got about 50 people. I don't think there is a passion among Australians for a republic. And anyway, we are already, we say, and of course it is disputed, we say it's a crowned republic anyway, so you've got a republic. We say you have an Australian head of state and the Governor-General. The system works superbly. Why not worry about the other parts of the Constitution which are causing us difficulty?